Hi there guys, it's James again, another tutorial for you. This time we're going to learn how to produce an image like this, which is sort of a neon glow cityscape, as you can see here. Now we're starting off with an image just like this. You'll see I've done the first couple of steps already. Now I've got this from some free wallpaper place, or a stock image site. Now what I've done initially is to simply duplicate the layer and add a totally black layer beneath that duplicate layer. Now the first thing we want to do is get rid of all this water at the bottom here, the bridges, reflections. Now we don't need that for the image. So all we do is just select it. There we go. And then delete it. And you can see that black layer now is showing through below it. Now as you can see on the one I've already worked on, obviously the buildings are coming off at those quite jaunty angles, you could say. So we want to recreate that here. To do that we go to Edit, we go to Transform, and then we go to Warp. Now you can see the grid has popped up here, so we don't want Custom, we want to go down to Arc on the top left here. And there we go. Now obviously that looks quite a lot more than what it should do, so where it says Bend at 50%, you don't want that top left, you want to type in 20%. Once that's done, we go back to Arc, and then we go back to Custom. Now we see here at the bottom you've got two little lines that suddenly appear with the little circles at the end of them. Click on that and carefully drag down so it appears to be flat. Let's try that one. Okay, that looks roughly flat, so press enter when you're done, and there we go, transformed. Now the next step is to delete the sky. Rather than subject you for 5 minutes of me doing this, I have got one I've done before. Once you finish selecting all the sky, be careful to see all the buildings, make sure you've got all the edges correct. You just want to press delete and get rid of that sky so it goes back to a black background as the layer beforehand, so which is what I've done here. Now the next thing I want to do is to create the stylized glowing edges style to it. There's a bit of a clue then how to do it. What you want to do is go to Filter, Stylized, down the bottom there, and go to Glowing Edges. Get that boot up. Okay, now the selections you want, the settings, on edge width you want 2, edge brightness you want 10, and smoothness you want to set to 8, and then OK it. There we go. Now we want to change the layer blend mode of this particular layer to linear dodge. Next thing you want to do then is lock the transparency of this particular layer. Now we can reduce the opacity if you want to, if you don't want it quite so garish, shall we say. You can bring that back down or put it back up again. I'm going to keep it at 100% because I like the look of it. So next thing we want to do now is colorise each one of these buildings in turn. Now what we want to do is create a new layer. There we go. Now you want to set the blending mode to colour dodge of this new layer. And then we select our brush tool and set the opacity to around about 30%, as you can see up here. Now you want to select the colours you want to use for each building, so it's literally a case of selecting the brush colour, and we'll start off with say a red for the far left building. So you simply paint it on, just as you would a paintbrush, up until the next building. So there we've got our 5 or 6 buildings, however you want to see it, and they've all been individually colorised. Now the next step is what takes the longest, to be honest with you, and it's you're selecting a pen path around each individual building, and then you're inducing a layer glow or an outer glow into that layer for each path that you've drawn. I'll show you the first one. I have done a previous one where it's all been done already, just to save time for you. But I'll show you how to do the first one. Obviously you can just replicate it again and again for the other ones. So we want a new layer for each one of the groups of buildings or buildings that you're using. For this case we're obviously doing 5, so we want 5 new layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we go down to the first layer here. Now the first thing we want to do is create the pen path, so select the pen tool, press P on your keyboard, and then literally it's just a case of outlining the building step by step. Okay, so we've got our pen tool there. Now what we want to do is to go back to the brushes palette, and rather than using a basic brush as they're called, we want to use something a bit different. So go into the brushes palette up here and go to the little arrow there and go down to these guys here, the calligraphic brushes. Okay, and pick the smallest, the size 7, and then press enter. Now we want to set the brush colour to white. Back to pen tool and right click and go to stroke path and OK. Now you can see it's just sort of lit a very dim sort of glow around the edge there, so obviously that's not quite good enough. So over to the layer where this pen path is on and double click the layer. It brings up the layer options here, the layer style. We want outer glow, and of course we want to match the colour of the outer glow to the colour of the building, so it's simply a case of going back to the colour you picked there. Change the opacity to a full 100%, and where it says quality here on the contour, we don't want this straight line here, it's a little bit boring. We go down to the far left at the bottom, makes it just that little bit brighter, and click off and OK that. Now that's the first one done. Now you'll find when you go to do the second one on the next layer, so we go to layer 5 and we'll just start again. I'll do the outline, go back to stroke path, and it will basically do the same again. Now you might have noticed it's also affected this building here again, the red one. So let's finish off the blue building. So remember, double click on the layer, outer glow, and we want to go for obviously the blue colour for this particular building. Here's the blue, remember 100% opacity, and change the contour there, and let's OK that. Now you'll see obviously it's done the same thing for the path on the red building as well. So one way of getting rid of that is literally on this layer, go to layer mask, button there at the bottom right, and using your brush tool, now this is where the time comes into, you need to change your brush back to a normal basic brush. It'll just take too long to do it with a calligraphic brush. So back to the arrow there, down to basic brushes, OK that, and literally just go back over where that brush was. So there we go. So that's the first one done, the second one done, and as you go through it, obviously you do the pen path for each building, stroke the path, do the outer glow for the layer, and then a layer mask to delete the effect on the previous buildings. A little bit complicated, and there probably is a shorter way of doing it, but that's just the way I've learned how to do it. So do it that way. So obviously we've got here's one I made earlier. So obviously you've seen I've got each of the paths selected and highlighted, and we're ready to move on from here. Okay, so we've merged all those layers from beforehand into one new layer. Now the next option to do is to transform and flip this vertically. So as I said, this is for the reflection below the building. So we go to Edit, go to Transform, we go to Flip Vertical. There we go. Now we immediately want to move these down, obviously to a reflection sort of area. About there. That'll do perfectly. Okay. Now I want to change the layer blending option as well. So we want to go to, again, linear dodge. Now we also need to change the transparency of this frame as well. So we need to reduce that down to about 40% so it appears to be a reflection. Okay. Then we need to duplicate this layer. Duplicate. Now on the first one, so the original layer, we want to run a Gaussian blur on it. So we need to go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian blur. Now 5 pixels is roughly about right, you can see it changing on there, so simply OK that. And then we go back to the duplicated layer, where we want to set a radial blur. So again, Filter, Blur, and Radial blur. Now we want the blur method to be zoom rather than spin, and we want to push the centre of the blur centre to the high, to the top. Now the amount, you want to run about 15 to 20, so if we just say 17, that would be good enough, and we click OK, and wait for that to do what it does, and there we go. There's that reflection. So it's sort of a glassy, maybe even watery sort of reflection below those buildings. So the last thing we've got to do now is to create that horizon. So we create a new layer, layer 10, and using the pen tool, we now want to basically create a horizon behind our building. So we start off obviously on the left hand side, and just think of a horizon, sort of a hilly sort of and around the frame, and then complete it like that. Next thing we want to do is use this as a selection, make selection, and then we OK that. The first things first, we need to invert the selection. So you can go to select and inverse. So now you've selected the top half of the frame there. And we, instead of using a normal gradient tool, we need to select a colour gradient. So we go down to the gradient palette here, then go down to simple. Okay, and we want to select probably a yellow if we're going to go for a sunrise or a sunset. You can go for red of course as well, but go for a yellow. And hit enter. Now what we also want to do is use the radial gradient tool, and we start off by doing that. So you've got the whole lot of that is yellow. Now obviously that looks completely ridiculous, so we want to go back to the gradient palette, and we want to go back down to neutral density, so this the normal sort of gradients you get. Okay, that one, and select the far left at the top, so the very gentle one. Enter. Now we don't want radial gradient anymore. We want the standard gradient there. Select that, and all we want to do is simply work in a glow. Okay, so you've got your rough horizon there. You can see the glow coming out of it. Obviously you can see it's cut off all the buildings here, but that's not really a problem. On the bottom right hand side, go back to the layers palette here. You see obviously the horizon glow layer is at the top there. And what we want to do is drag that layer down to below the city layer. And as you'll see, the further I drag it down, the more stuff is revealed. Building's coming back, colouring's coming back, and there we go. Now what you can do to finish off is obviously make these lines here, the horizon lines, a little bit more realistic. The way you can do that is to literally use a brush. There we go. Just something that says it's not obviously been drawn on by a pen tool. Of course, if you've got any brushes that include, trees, that sort of thing, obviously then you can put those in there and make it look like you've got trees in the background. But I hope that's going to be some help. If you think of any quicker ways to do this pen tool where I didn't have to keep masking it all the time, please let me know because it'll be of use to me. Okay, hope that helps.